Okay. Can you hear me, Nancy?
Yes.
Okay, great. Well, good afternoon, everyone. First, I want to thank you all for making time in your busy schedules to join today's important discussion, which is brought to you by two communities of interest under ACT-IAC. My name is Varsha Maheshwari, and I serve as the industry chair for the IT Management and Modernization community of interest. Before we begin, just a couple of quick housekeeping items. We are recording today's session, and we will make it available on the ACT-IAC website. So no need to worry about taking any notes. Just tune in, absorb the conversation, and feel free to also use the chat feature for any questions. We will be monitoring the chat throughout the conversation, and our amazing moderator today will also help address questions as they come in. And now a brief word about the IT Management and Modernization COI. And several of my colleagues are actually here representing the COI. So this community of interest's goal is to advise and equip government agencies with best practices and insights to strengthen IT management and accelerate legacy IT modernization. So we cover a full spectrum of IT management, from strategy to policy development to governance, CPIC, FITARA, implementation, program and project management, operations management, you name it. So if you'd like to learn more about this COI, or if you'd like to get involved with this COI, please feel free to reach out. We're always looking for more members as well as more leaders to join us. And with that, I will hand it over to Geesa Sateri, who will share a bit about the acquisition COI. Over to you, Geesa.
Thank you, Varsha. Good afternoon, everyone. Again, my name is Geesa Sateri with SAIC, and I serve as the Acquisition COI Industry Chair. Our COI team includes, I think if you've switched over to that, I don't know if you're sharing the slides, Nancy, but our team includes Scott Simpson, who's our government chair as of last Friday. He just actually moved on to take on an industry role as of this past Monday. And our government co-chair is Mike Scorney with GSA, and our industry co-chair, Ben Meyerland, who just joined MetroStar, and our program chair, Nicole Nunn from Nuvatech. Our COI mission is really focused on connecting government, procurement, program, and industry to new ideas and approaches to improve federal acquisition. Over the past few months, as you all know, acquisition's been in the news a lot as of late. We've held a series of COI meetings focused on the FAR overhaul. And for today's meeting, since it's focused on the FAR overhaul as it relates to technology buy, we partnered up with the IT Modernization COI. We have a packed agenda with an amazing panel of speakers. I'll now pass it on to my counterpart, Nicole, to introduce our moderator for today's meeting.
Awesome.
Nicole?
Thank you so much. Well, it's my pleasure to introduce to you Melvin Brown, who will be serving as today's moderator for this joint session with the Acquisition and IT Management and Modernization COI teams. I'm sure this isn't the first time many of you have seen or heard from Melvin. He is a seasoned senior executive IT leader with over 3 decades of experience serving across the military, the public, and private sectors. He is a former executive over at the U.S. Office of Personnel Management, and he's built a really distinguished career defined by visionary leadership and a commitment to service across the federal government. With that, he's recognized as a thoughtful leader and a strategist, and he brings a unique perspective to solving complex mission challenges, which is why we have him geared up today to help modern today's panel. So for that, can you guys all please help me by welcoming Melvin for today's discussion on the shifting landscape of federal procurement and the FAR overhaul. So Melvin, the floor is all yours.
Thanks, Nicole, and I'm ridiculously honored to be here again. I mean, these two COIs are passions of mine, and specifically the ITMM, because I've served as Dan's deputy for years and then became the executive sponsor. So I'm excited. But I'm also excited about this panel. If you can go to the next slide. We've got a dynamic panel. Polly Hall, Jamie Holcombe, and Daisy are going to be, sharing with us their perspective on what we're seeing in this space. And so I want to start with you, Polly. Tell me a little bit about, we're talking about this FAR overhaul. What are some of the significant challenges you've identified in an existing FAR framework, and how did that impact the federal acquisition process?
Well, first of all, I am so happy to be here and really look forward to today's conversation. ACT-IAC and these two COIs are fantastic and value-added contributors to our collective conversations and dialogue. So thank you so much for having me. We've been on the FAR overhaul journey in preparation for it, even weeks before the executive order was issued back in April. We are at the phase of the journey now, but we call it the kind of end of the beginning, right? We have officially deviated 49 parts and merged, 2 parts so that they're a consolidated body of knowledge on our RFO overhaul site. But we are through the deviation phase, but are just now preparing for rulemaking. And in fact, many agencies coming out of the shutdown are still just kind of bringing online their agency level deviations based on the model deviation. So, we are in a very interesting time for federal acquisition, right? What rules we're following and how our workforce and our industry partners understand how to plan, build, solicit, and award mission needs is going to be continually, changing for the near term, because we expect, rulemaking to further inform the final new codification of our regulations. As we approached our work to get after what challenges we were trying to accomplish, right? I think it's just important to reset for everybody that we had an executive order to follow and 2 other related executive orders that we had to kind of consider as we overhauled the FAR. Obviously, the EO on restoring common sense to federal procurement said, bring the FAR down to statutory roots and what's necessary for sound procurement practice. A little discretion in that, what's necessary for sound procurement practice, but we knew we are, needed to meet the mandate of deregulation, right? But the other 2 executive orders that were really critical to the work of the team were the executive order issued on the same day, tax day, with the FAR overhaul executive order, and that's the ensuring commercial cost-effective solutions executive order, as well as the executive order which was issued a little bit before that, which was the consolidation of procurement. I think it's called eliminating waste and saving taxpayers' dollars by consolidating procurement, right? And so all of that really informed kind of our policy perspective as we approach the FAR overhaul. And so those were the challenges, right? To kind of build the correlation, right? That triangle into the new policy framework. From a challenge perspective, right? And for better or for worse, right? The FAR had a bad rap. I'm going to argue that we had lots of flexibility in the old FAR, but it had a bad rap, right? And I think one of the key challenges that we had the opportunity to kind of try to solve for was that we tended to treat everything the same. And we know our mission has requirements that are relatively simple and requirements that are extremely complicated and complex. And so treating everything the same doesn't make sense. We should not spend the same amount of time and documentation requirements for an acquisition that is simple versus other than simple. And so to me, that continuum and if anybody's gotten under the hood of our recently released category management buying guide, which is embedded as a link in the FAR companion version 2 that was released on October 30th under excerpt for 8.104, which is the excerpt on using existing government vehicles, obvious place to kind of put guidance around category management. But there's a continuum in that category management framework that I think kind of builds out the challenges that we were trying to solve, which is let's not treat everything the same. What we buy is a continuum, and we should really kind of help through policy our workforce and our acquisition community writ large stay in the right lane, and keep simple, use procedures that are simple, and then spend our time and our talent and our engagement time, right? Really doing thorough planning and requirements development for non-simple.
Great. And one of the things I want to share with the audience as we're going through this question and this dialogue, if you have a question, please drop it in the chat. I'll be coming back from time to time and get questions there. Mr. Holcombe, Jamie, so good to see you. Welcome to this side of the fence. Glad to see you over at USAI. And so we're talking about commercialization. So the president issued an executive order 14271 on ensuring commercial cost-effective solutions in federal contracting. This was in early April this year. What's your assessment of how well the federal government utilizes commercial solutions? Then do you have any examples of where it's being done to particularly improve the process?
Sure. I'd like to validate what Polly was talking about. They're going through the revamp right now, and the whole characterization of what the FAR should be. Because as Polly said, one of the things that people don't realize is how flexible the FAR truly is. The revamp is just a revalidation of those abilities to adapt. Now, you ask about what commercial things really work. Well, I believe that the whole process of procurement needs to be overhauled to the point of not only better, but cheaper and faster. One of the things the government is not putting enough emphasis or focus or priority on is cheaper and faster. And one of the reasons is because in a democracy like we have and all the statutes that we have to follow, we want to ensure that there's no corruption behind the scenes and we don't promote any type of crony capitalism. At the same time, we should be using that commercial idea. I mean, I went through DOGE just like everybody else. And DOGE now has to follow through and get some of these great ideas that they had. They have to actually implement them with negotiated terms and conditions that are favorable to the U.S. government. And I say that because it seems that only a few real big firms get involved with government contracting. What we need to do is have the real ability to negotiate and compete on a fast basis. Everybody's saying that's unfair and it's not right. No, because we're going to publish this right out. It's always been there. It's just never been done. Okay, what did I do at the Patent and Trademark Office that I thought was really revolutionary or whatever? What we did was we had bake-offs. And what I want to have more of are those code development type bake-offs right in the room as it's happening. In other words, the requirement is given as an example, not as the requirement, but then the capability is shown. And why is that okay nowadays and not before? Because we do have AI assisted, generative AI, and code assist. So I've joined USAI because it's real. The ability to actually compete in the real time is there. You don't have to spend 3 or 4 months on requirements. You can get them out in one day. Okay, so we hold these types of bake-offs and we conduct them over a 3-day period. You're given the requirements, you go back and forth on all of the different questions and answers. Everybody has the same ability, everybody has the same requirements right in front of them. And then you bake it off and you choose at the end. You don't go through all this rigmarole and all this bureaucracy, and we get the results that we need. That's what I think really needs to happen in the future with the FAR. Back to you, Melvin.
Thank you so much, Jamie, and I appreciate that. I echo all of your words about our ability to streamline and have bake-offs and do things real time. We can do things a whole lot faster. So, Dave Z, you batting clean up here, my friend. OneGov strategy. We're talking about a OneGov strategy. Can you provide an overview of the OneGov strategy and its primary objectives for transforming the federal procurement process, just based on your experience at GSA and what you're seeing now?
Sure. Well, great to be here, first of all, and tough spot, tough acts to follow. I'll do my best. Um, you know, actually, Polly and Jamie both mentioned category management and sort of the flexibilities there. And in some respects, OneGov is an extension of the philosophy that we should, the government should be having closer and better relationships with its suppliers and with, better negotiated terms with its suppliers. And so OneGov as a strategy has been driven largely to think about how we can get closer to the OEMs, the original equipment manufacturers, and sort of think about how we can negotiate discounted terms through volumetric pricing, which is a great use of category management as an approach. I think one of the things I will offer is the jury is still out in terms of how effective it will be over time. One of the things that you will hear from me as like a resident skeptic out there is like the data. There is not a lot of data around the program in terms of its use to date and how effective it is. There are, for example, some of the negotiated contracts that expire at the end of this month. I have no idea if there were any sales against any of those contracts. So like there's a lot to be a lot that's still to be determined in terms of the efficacy of the OneGov strategy. But I do think that it actually speaks to a broader set of policies that are worth noting. And so I just wanted to like bring them out in addition to the revolutionary FAR overhaul that Polly mentioned, and the IT consolidation, the EOs and Doge. One notable thing that I think we don't want to look past is the implementation of TDR sort of across the entire GSA schedules program. That happened, not without some controversy, not without some detractors, but is fundamentally aimed at reducing the complexity and the burden for schedule holders, and thinking about how you can get rid of the commercial sales practice and the price reduction clause, which had been real barriers, honestly, for OEMs that were thinking about interacting with the government. And so that signals, I think, a little bit of the direction of where the government is going, as well as things like FedRAMP 20X and sort of the efforts to try to streamline and improve the government's processes by which it considers commercial vendors. So I think you're seeing a lot of really interesting activities. Obviously, OneGov is part of a broader set of policies that are out there, all aiming toward more commerciality, all aiming toward more sort of streamlined interactions with the private sector.
So Dave, I want to stay with you for a second. I got a follow-up question. Do you see any differences in how large, mid-size, or small integrators go to market as a result of this initiative? What do you see?
Yeah, I mean, well, so here's where I'm going to be probably the most critical of the administration, and then I'll pull back from the criticism. One of the disappointing things from my perspective about the OneGov strategy is it's all companies that you'll see sort of in your Silicon Valley sort of tech ecosystem, right? So, you've got Amazon, you've got Google, Microsoft, OpenAI, Anthropic, xAI, DocuSign, Box. These are not small or mid-sized firms. These are all giant tech companies. And as far as I know, though, again, the data is not really clear to me, these are not actually even direct contracts with those companies. They're indirect contracts with schedule holders like Carahsoft. And so I think that the reality is like a little bit different from sort of what we might want in terms of how the government approaches this. And what we've seen from an engagement perspective is that there's a lot of grounds that's yet to be covered. So I don't want to be too critical to say that there's no potential there. But what we've seen so far is that the early engagement has been by the bigs. And so I think there's a space for small and mid-sized firms to say, you know what, we tend to be pretty scrappy. We know how to negotiate a good bargain too. We know how to do well by the federal government and our customers' and mission. And so I think there's a space for it, but that's not so far been the space that's been occupied.
All right, and so then last question to you, and so Polly and Jamie, I'm coming back. Just give me a second, because this is a great topic. How do you see systems integrators aligning themselves within this initiative? What are you seeing? Well, how do you see it?
That's actually one area where I think there was a lot of the jury was really out early this spring and summer about how SIs were going to interact with the OneGov policy and the like. And what I've seen of like my lived experience here, though I certainly welcome others to disagree if they see something different, is that there hasn't been a whole lot of movement away from sort of working with SIs as partners and as channel for tech companies, as well as SIs having a critical role. I mean, you are seeing some effective Doge. So I do want to emphasize, I pulled the numbers, and I haven't seen this publicized anywhere, but my understanding from FPDS is that, you know, we are seeing numbers that are historically low compared to spending, you know, at least in the last 5 years, right? So FY25 spend on 5415 NAICS codes are down to FY22 levels. So you do see some impact in terms of what people are, you know, the amount of work that's out there. And yet, I think that SIs are still playing a major role and will continue to play a major role and are continuing to be critical partners from industry as well as from government.
Great. And so, Jamie, I'm going to come back to you. We talk about automation, AI, and the role of AI in the federal procurement technology integration. And so, what role do you see technology playing in the modernization of the federal procurement process? How can agencies leverage technology advancements to enhance that based on your work?
I will tell you that the new models for generative AI have been proven to work. And if you haven't played with them, you need to. And I say that because we did our own pilot and created our own LLM at the Patent and Trademark Office. We call it Scout. The only reason we did that and didn't rely on the commerciality because they weren't ready. One of the things you have to ensure for is your secrecy and to make sure things don't get out. So we took a architectural structure such that any data in never came out. And so that was a very secure way then and reliable way to then experiment. And that's what people should be doing right now with this generative AI tools, because to answer your question, what the federal government can do now is actually take any of the new generative models that they've been given by a lot of the new technology companies. All you have to do is go to usai.gov. Now, it's funny. David Shive knows this. I said, wait a second, what are you doing? You took USAI, that's me now, and you took it over as .gov. Come on. Anyway, it was really funny. But I will say that the algorithms and models are available, so I'm pitching for him too right now, usai.gov. And if you want to check us out, we're at usai.io. But okay, whatever. Anyway, from there, though, you can take all of your new procurements and all of that, throw it into the models and get what you want out. But in order to do that, you have to experiment. You have to know how it works. You have to know how to prevent all these hallucinations. You have to understand how to get precision and how to take this and get better and better then at evaluating. Then you can have data-driven decisions. Oh my gosh, we've been talking about this. There's an executive order. Let's do it. We can do it by getting the right algorithms in place and using these tools to our advantage, better, cheaper, and faster. And I think that's what you were asking, Melvin.
I was, and so I'm gonna tee this up for Polly. And so, Polly, we've heard a whole lot about AI in the federal procurement meeting in the near future. Does the panel, or for you, Polly, do you have any insight in the way you think that would look like, or what should it look like?
I mean, I think we've been building our acquisition community, at least on the Fed side's understanding, comfortability, right, and willingness to use AI for many years now, right? And I think we're finally at the point where agencies are, really more rigorously deploying solutions that allow us to leverage AI for our daily work. My experience personally is limited to DHS and GSA, but both agencies have available for their workforce DHS Chad and GSA I versus USAI now, right? Capabilities. GSA's is multi-model that we readily use on a daily basis for our work. Since joining the FAR Overhaul, we've leveraged AI to help us with our regulatory analysis. We've leveraged AI to review and consolidate, synthesize, and prioritize the public feedback that we've solicited for every FAR model deviation and their non-regulatory guide. So, I mean, it is already being used across the community for daily work. I've seen great examples of it being used to flesh out and build out requirements to consider different acquisition strategies and approaches, to draft and develop RFI languages or sources sought languages, even to build solicitations and frameworks. And so I think some of the areas where we still have a little bit more engagement and trust building to do are using it for vehicle selection, right? We've got some early models there. I think we have more work to do on ensuring that they are trustworthy, understandable, and holistically considering opportunities against both open market and compliant-driven decisions based on the FAR framework. We also, I think, have a little bit more trust work and communication to build as we leverage it more robustly for things like source selection and evaluation. So I think we've come a long way. I think there's more opportunities for use ahead. GSA recently released the RFI for the procurement automation ecosystem, and so I see strong interest from other agencies about what that looks like and the results of that. And so I think the future is our oyster. I don't think there's walking back. I think it's really more making sure we're building it with our workforce so that they do understand its limitation and value add. But also, to Jamie's strong point, right? We do have to understand what it is doing with our data and making sure we have the right data protections in play.
Yeah, let me piggyback on it. Dave, I'm coming to you.
He wants you to so bad, Melvin.
Yeah, no, Dave, I'm coming. Let me tee it up. So, Dave, we talked a little bit about AI, but we talked about the policy implications and the future direction. And so how do you foresee the federal procurement process evolving over the next 5 years? What are some of the critical areas that you think are still going to need continuous improvement? Love to get your thoughts.
Fair enough. But before I do, I have to give a shout out because Polly's a little bit modest. Polly's been working on the intersection of AI and sort of the use of AI for procurement and the procurement process for at least 6 years, which is more than I think anybody can claim. You're like an AI native in sort of the ecosystem. I know that from personal lived experience that she's been at this cutting edge for a while. So, I think the interesting thing about policy is that I don't want to over index on AI but I have to talk about AI in terms of the impact on policy because I think it's doing a couple of things. One is that it's changing obviously with the work that people are doing. So we've already talked about sort of the ways that AI can change and sort of interact in the procurement cycle. And on the industry side, folks on the government may not realize this. There is massive amounts of disruption that's happening on the industry side in terms of how AI is interacting with the work that we do day to day. Everything from opportunity identification to proposal management to delivery to managing the firm to hiring, everything. AI is having a massive impact in terms of what we do day to day. And so I think that's going to have an equal impact in terms of government over time. I think it's going to become in the way that the internet is ubiquitous. I think that AI is going to be ubiquitous in terms of how we have to incorporate it into our work. But the other thing that AI is doing is we're starting to see emerging different business models and pricing models. And so I'm remembering how we saw like the X as a service, right? When cloud became a big thing, the federal government had a really hard time, and it really took until just recently to embrace consumption-based pricing as something that was permitted under the law. We are seeing some different pricing models emerge around AI businesses that I think will challenge what the government can and can't do in terms of how it buys AI services at scale. And I don't mean sort of the frontier models. I think we already understand how those things are shaping out. But when the layers that are sitting on top of those frontier models, I think that's where there's still a lot to be determined in terms of how the government is able to procure those services. So I think that's going to need some policy work just inevitably because it's going to have an impact on our our economy and our government, and as a result, on our procurement landscape. But I also wanted to offer a couple of bold predictions, because I think that this is probably my most sort of hot take, sort of counter position from, I think, a lot of folks. I actually think that we're going to see some pretty dramatic changes to how the government talks and thinks about category management over the next decade. If to the extent that there's been to the extent that there's been a dominant theme over the last 15 years in terms of procurement policy, it's been category management, category management, category management. I'm not saying that the category management project hasn't been successful. I'm just saying that the universe is shifting, and I don't think that category management is going to be viewed as the most important thing for government as it goes forward. And I think partially that's because we're going to have better data, and we're going to have better expectations of using that data to get better outcomes. And I also just think that organizationally, the government has tried different implementations of category management, and I'm not certain that the configuration of the government as it is going to be amenable to long-term category management success. So I do think that there's going to be some changes. I don't know that they come easy. I don't think that they come without gnashing of teeth. But I suspect that that's where some of this is going to have to go over the next decade, largely driven by the fact, again, how people do their work is changing pretty dramatically.
All right. And so I just want to remind everybody again, if you've got questions, let's drop them in the chat, please. So Dave, let me ask you, how important is stakeholder collaboration going to be in the success of this new procurement initiative? What does, how can the private sector companies, how can they engage the government? What does that new model look like to you?
Yeah, this is huge. I think that right now what I've seen, and this is really, in some respects, it's interesting if you had asked me this question 6 months ago, I might have had a different reaction. I think the early days of this administration were very confusing in terms of like what to expect in terms of the policy direction, and in terms of how the industry and government should start to collaborate. But I think it's becoming clearer that that there's an emphasis, and this was true in previous administrations too, but I think that this is just like this is a norm that's returning, and a good norm that's returning, is that you got to put up or shut up, right? There's not a lot of time or space anymore for people like, hey, I want to just like talk about a thing. Kind of as Jamie was saying, like we need people who are able to deliver a capability, not just talk about a capability. And especially as we have, dwindling resources within the federal space, as we have more attention and more challenges as a nation that we face, we really need people to be able to show up to the table with results. And so I think that that is a challenge to industry, obviously, to make sure that you're putting up and shutting up. But I also think that the government needs to, is going to have to adapt how it approaches its relationship with industry. Having been on the government side and having spent a lot of time trying to be arm's length with industry, echoing Jamie's point, there are good reasons and good rules around why you want to maintain that arm's length relationship. But as the United States finds itself in sort of challenges internationally, or even domestically, as we think about how we approach our buying needs, we need to really be more engaged from an industry government collaboration perspective, which is why programs like ACT-IAC are excellent, because they create those relationships and facilitate dialogue.
Jamie, same question to you. What are you seeing now that you're on, you've flipped the script, you're on the other side now, and so managing stakeholders, you're seeing it from both sides. What are you seeing, and what strategies do you think need to be employed to foster better collaboration between the federal agencies and their contractors now that you're on the side?
Well, I got to validate what Dave said. The fact is that there are profound changes being conducted right now across America. And we are in a cocoon within the Beltway. And so we're sort of protected from that based on all these regulations that we want to change and become better, cheaper, and faster. Well, that's not that's not an option for the competitive capitalistic world. They're out there doing it right now, to the point where you see the layoffs going on. So you've also seen the fact that the government has gone through now a RIF. I do think that this is a once in a lifetime opportunity for the next, 40 years before, now 40 years later. The things that we create as a foundation are going to be felt years later, 10, 20 years later. So what we really need to do right now is be bold and take that action. The ability to take advantage of something, do it now. Make it cheaper and faster, because better will always work on. That's never in question. The big thing is to put in strategic guidelines that are faster and cheaper. The reason that AI among all is the biggest tool going forward, is anybody talking about blockchain anymore? Anybody talking about non-fungible tokens anymore? There's so many different emerging technologies. The reason that AI is coming to fore is not because it's great, it's because it's fast. It allows you to do the same thing that you could have done before in 3 days in one. And that's the deal. So what do you have to do to set up? What is the future? The future is faster. And that's why we have to put these procedures, these processes, such that they can adapt to become much more fast than they currently are. This thing about having procurement for 30 days, it should not have any timeline associated with it. When the requirement gets done, it gets done, period. Do not put milestones and days on it. That's the way project management is going now. When it gets done, you do it, and then everything is put together. Because before it was manual, now it's automagic. And I'll say that because a lot of people don't understand what's going on. All they're doing is taking everything that was manual, making it automated, and therefore you have more options now than you did before. So make sure that the foundation we create is speedy and affordable. Hell, we could have electric cars right now if it wasn't for the thing that it's not affordable. So again, cheaper and faster, my two main things. Back to you, Melvin.
All right, Polly, based on where you're sitting now, what can we do, what can industry do to better improve the communication and collaboration, between the agencies and the contractors that, help to get us to, as Jamie's point, faster and cheaper?
Yeah, I mean, I think Dave hit on some really key things, right? The drive to we've got truncated timelines due to prolonged budget negotiations or lack thereof, whatever you want to say, right? Like the reality is that a smaller workforce that is in the midst of some significant change in how we do business, and this is on both sides, right? Are going to have exasperated timelines to deliver mission essential requirements. And so I think the recognition of the value of time is critical, and focusing on mission first is critical. And so that should inform our collaboration, right? We don't have time to put requirements out that we think are fully baked because we failed to engage, and then have industry come back to us with a bazillion questions because we got it wrong, and then go back to the drawing line and take months to start all over again. We have to build together and build early, especially on those other than simple, especially service, right, contracts. And so to me, engagement matters. It's always mattered, but during these times of tremendous change, it's going to matter the most. And honestly, a piece of that I really just need to plug here is we have to have some empathy to each other, because we are learning right now how the new regulatory framework is going to look and feel. And as we take policy and intent and put it to practice over the next months and several months and years to come, our workforce is being asked to do things that they may not have been provided the opportunity to do, in spite of what we might have viewed as policy flexibility at the federal level. So using discretion and critical thought versus templates and compliance oriented prescribed steps is going to take some time for our workforce to feel comfortable and confident with. So you might see things different on the industry end. You might not know what to put together on the government end, but we're going to need to collaborate and work together and then learn from each other on the journey. Because if we don't, and if we fail here, Jamie, to your point, we're going to end up back where we are today 40 years from now. And that's really not where I think any of us want to be. I think we want to take advantage of the moment and really build a modern future system.
Well, I will tell you firsthand that I'm excited about this consumption-based model, this consumption-based buying. You know, and I'm going to take moderator privilege here. I was the government rep for the FinOps Foundation. So, Jamie, I'm going to do my plug for FinOps as a consumption-based framework, trying to bring that into the federal space. And now I'm starting to see contracts that have that in there, where we're re-looking at how we buy things. And so I can tell you, moving to a consumption-based model, one of the biggest challenges that we have was the budget process and our ability to buy and commit long-term. And so if we can start to examine that, we can also increase our savings by some 20 to 30% because we've done those advanced purchases with cloud. And so we've got to make sure that the policies line up to where the technology is going. And so I am not a part of the panel, so I'm going to stop talking and ask more questions now. So with that, Daisy, Polly, go ahead.
I just want to build off of that really quick, because I think it really is, of all the things we've done, one of the exciting things we've done in FAR Part 16 is really open up other contract types. And as we build out practice-based guidance in the FAR Companion around firm fixed unit pricing, around consumption-based frameworks, and then under 37 around variations of performance-based contracting that really drive outcome-based frameworks, right? Where we drive an outcome, not metrics at the time of award, but a management framework that we operate under award. I just think there's really, really important opportunity there to structure contracts that really will meet the various mission needs for partnership models, which to me kind of just is a nice wrap bow for our collaboration conversation.
So Polly, we'll just stay there for a second, because you said something about the COs, and I want to ask you a question, and this question came from the audience. If you were to tell a CO something right now, what would be the one thing you tell them about this new overhaul, and what would you like to see from them?
To me, what I would like to see from our COs is leaning in and challenging the assumptions that others around them might have. I think this is our time as a CO to know our business, to know our market, to know our customers' needs, and to really lean in heavy to the role of business advisor. And that might be challenging the why do I have to do X, Y, or Z. I think we've created a lot of opportunity to do right by what the mission and markets demand, but there's a lot of existing assumptions about what we should be doing. And so it's asking those questions and challenging the why. And that's not going to feel easy, especially with what I know is in front of them and what's on their plates. And especially in the moments right now where many agencies are still doing contract reviews at the highest level for the lowest dollar thresholds, right? So I know these changes might not be overnights. Just be patient, be persistent, stick with us because we need you, and then know that there are going to be really cool opportunities as we continue to move out of kind of a reset mode into a future mode.
Daisy, I'm coming your way. So go ahead, please.
If I could answer that question in a slightly different way, because I think it's a great question. And I think what I would want to say is I see you to the CO, because like, as Polly mentioned, this is a really difficult time for COs as everyone's sort of adapting to the new order. But then I would also, I kind of want to challenge my colleagues on the industry side, and to a certain extent challenge folks on the government side. This needs to stop being a CO conversation. That fundamentally the challenges that we're facing from a procurement community are actually a cross-functional challenge. So we need, as Jamie mentioned, like we should have requirements in minutes. Well, oftentimes the contracting officer doesn't have a whole lot of say about what those requirements are. We need the entirety of governments to realize that procurement is not going to be a CO problem. And so I think one of the things that I'm hopeful for is that once we get sort of the arguments like, oh, we can't do anything under the FAR. Well, we've changed the FAR. Now, how do we have a real conversation about getting these results? Because now the policy is not in your way. What is in your way is like, we actually need to start working together as a team. And so I'd want to say, like, I see you, CEO, we recognize you, but then now how do we advocate for those CEOs to make sure that the rest of the acquisition cross-functional team is actually doing their part too?
All right, so we got about 12 minutes left, and so I want to allow these visionaries to think about this vision and to think about this question and be a little reflective. And so at the end of these 4 years, what do you hope that we will have accomplished? And what role do you think industry can play in that going forward? So I want to give you a minute to just kind of think about that. And as we begin to come to a close, I want to leave our audience with that: is what do we hope that we will have accomplished in the next 4 years in this space? And how do we think industry can help? And so, Polly, I'll start with you.
4 years into the future, I really one of the things that I have been most excited about is some of the changes in how we are building policy. This regulatory overhaul was not done under normal FAR Council processes where the CAC and the DARC were, kind of in a vacuum doing it and then giving us something in a, interim or proposed rule that we formally reacted to. For better or for worse, right? Operating by model deviations and agency issued deviations for a period of time is going to feel clunky and confusing, but it actually gives us an opportunity to test run things before we finalize them. And having practitioners at the table to inform policy and vice versa, right? For policy officials to explain to practitioners what the intent of policy is so that we can build a pathway to the realization in ways that are enactable and implementable and achievable, to me is a real difference in how we have worked. And so my hope in 4 years is that this is how we normally do business, that we build that bridge between policy and practice, and we build the bridge between our federal and our industry partners so that we are building this together, getting informal feedback along the journey to inform a rule. That's a novel new model as well. And I'm not pretending everybody operates in the policy framework, right? But down in the trenches, that will have impacts that matter a lot for our practitioners and our operational teams, cross-functional, to be able to really realize both policy goals and practice, but also to have their pain points more robustly brought up to inform changes to procedures, instructions, and those barriers for them. So to me, we have a normalization of that framework. To me, we have the realization of some of these very aspirational technology tools and resources for our workforce. That is going to take a lot of investment in how we build the right data lake and environment so that we actually can leverage holistic, meaningful data. And I'll give you an example. We have some cool solution finders out there to help guide our acquisition workforce members to existing resources or lack thereof as far as contract vehicles in the federal space that guide them either to leverage what works or to the open market. But they're piecemeal and disparate, and not all of the vehicles are in one place. And so when you're using a vehicle or a solution finder as an acquisition professional, you don't know what you don't know, what's included in there, what's not, and what other work do you have to do. So building holistic tools that are appropriately leveraging holistic data, to me, is the aspirational goal. And are we going to get there in 4 years? Golly, I hope so.
Daisy, over to you.
I wasn't going to say this because I wanted to think bigger, but my personal goal, I would love to see better data. I've been deeply, this is not a critique of this administration or the previous administration, the previous administration, the previous administration. It's like for so long, we've been not the best stewards of our procurement data. And I would love to see much better procurement data created, managed, and shared publicly. So like that would be something that I'd really like to see. That said, I do think that the broader thing is, even though that might be what I want, what I really want for Christmas is I really want that the government is able to deliver on mission, right? We have incredibly difficult jobs to do. And so what I hope is that after all these procedures and all these policy discussions and all these other things happen, at the end of the day, both industry and government are able to deliver on mission, so that people are able to get the services and the government is able to win.
Great. Jamie, in the last 5 minutes, final thoughts.
My final thoughts are both derived from Polly and Dave. First of all, Dave, if you don't have good data, you can't use AI. Period. Done. End of statement, right? Number two, Polly, that's my vision as well. The problem we have is policy does not equal execution. And our policymakers don't understand that. Policy is often done in a nirvana type of way. Wouldn't it be great if? And then the execution faces the harsh realities of not only a small budget, but the inability of capability at that end. I encourage everyone to bridge that gap by reading and watching two things. The first thing is a YouTube interview by Sam Corcus, Corcus. Sam is the current he is the CIO at Treasury. He gives a 2.5-hour interview from a Silicon Valley president and CEO of a high-tech company and what's wrong with the federal government. You gotta at least watch the first 30 or 40 minutes because he nails it. Number two, you gotta read the book Recoding America by Jennifer Palka, Obama's former CTO. Why? Because when I was reading the book, I thought she was talking about the PTO, and it had nothing to do with the PTO and everything to do with about Medicare, Medicaid, healthcare.gov, getting that up and running, and then also the Medicare problem in California during COVID. So I say that because they outline the ability to bridge the gap. And what does that also mean? I think the biggest issue right now is Main Street and the federal government are not connected. We are in a bubble in the federal government, and we have to get more toward Main Street. We have to understand what's going on in our communities in order to serve them better. They cannot understand. Think about the DMV. They can't understand why it's not all automated right now. You just don't walk up to a thing and get your driver's license. Come on. That's what a commercial entity would do. That's how they would do it. Why can't we do it? And we have to think about that from a citizen service point of view. Bring Main Street to the federal government and stop thinking about the bureaucracy. Think about how to cut it down and make it small. Smaller government works better for everyone. That's my vision.
Thank you, Jamie. Thank you, Polly. Thank you, Dave Z. Everybody, help me to thank them for their insight. Thank you for your time. And I do really appreciate all of the nuggets that was dropped. Jamie, Recoding America. Polly, we talked about having good data, being able to solve these problems. Daisy, making sure that we stay aligned, that we don't just target the large companies. Ladies and gentlemen, my name is Melvin Brown. Thank you so much for the opportunity. Nicole, Varsha, Gisha, back to you all.
Well, thank you,
Thank
Melvin.
you so much, Melvin. Much appreciated for you moderating the session. Polly, Dave, and Jane. Jamie, thank you very much for taking time out of your busy schedules to join us today. We have lots more COI meetings in the works for the coming weeks and months. We have an interesting event, hopefully with Larry Allen coming up in January. So please stay tuned for those. If you haven't already, please make sure you become a member of the COI, and so you can see all of our upcoming events and meetings and sessions, and vice versa for Varsha and team on the IT mod side. Thank you all very much. Have a fantastic day and hope to see you soon.
Thank you all.